He sat in his car outside the office, hands on the wheel, engine off. For 45 minutes, he didn't move. He had just been told, for the 14th time, that he wasn't good enough. That his idea would never work. That people like him don't make it. 14 rejections in 9 months. It was broke. He was exhausted. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice was beginning to agree with all of them. But here's what nobody knew. What happened in that car, in those 45 silent minutes, would eventually change everything. This is Unstoppable Stories. And today you'll discover the secret that every successful person carries. Not a trick, not a shortcut, not luck. Something far more powerful, and something you already have inside you right now. Stay with me. This one matters. His name was Marcus. He grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with his mother and 2 younger sisters. His father left when he was 7, not dramatically. He just stopped coming home one day. Marcus remembered the exact morning. He'd waited by the window with his school bag, thinking maybe his dad was just late. He waited until his mother gently told him to eat breakfast. He never waited by that window again. Growing up, Marcus learned to be quiet about wanting things. Because wanting things and not getting them hurt in a particular way that's hard to describe, the kind of hurt that sits in your chest like a stone. He was smart. His teachers said so. Potential, they wrote on his report cards. Year after year. But potential without opportunity is just a word. When he graduated high school, there was no money for college, so Marcus worked. He stacked shelves at night. He delivered packages during the day. He saved. He read every book he could borrow from the library. Business books, biographies, anything about people who had built something from nothing. He had an idea. A simple one. He wanted to create an affordable tutoring service for kids in neighborhoods like his, places where schools were underfunded, where kids fell behind not because they lacked intelligence, but because nobody had the time or the money to help them catch up. He'd been that kid once. He knew exactly what was missing. For 3 years, he worked on his plan. He wrote it out in a notebook at his kitchen table after his shifts. He made spreadsheets. He researched costs. He reached out to teachers and parents in his community. And then he began knocking on doors. The first door was a local community foundation. They told him the idea was too small-scale to fund. The second door, a nonprofit he admired, told him he lacked the credentials. One investor, during what he thought was a promising meeting, actually laughed. Not unkindly, but he laughed. "You've never run anything," the man said. "Come back when you have experience." Marcus went home that night and stood in front of his bathroom mirror for a long time. He didn't cry. He just stared. Then came the morning he remembered most. He had put together a presentation, weeks of work, printed on borrowed printer paper, and pitched it to a small business grant committee. He'd practiced for 30 days. He knew every slide. He believed in every word. Y pasé. And worse, a woman on the committee pulled him aside afterward. She meant well. She really did. "Marcus," she said softly, "maybe this isn't the right path for you. There's no shame in that. Some people are meant to execute other people's visions. Not everyone is meant to lead." He thanked her. He walked to his car. Sat down. That was the 45 minutes. Because in that parking lot, Marcus wasn't just processing another rejection. He was processing 14 rejections in 9 months. He was processing a childhood of not having enough. He was processing every teacher who had written potential without ever building a bridge to it. He was face to face with the possibility, the very real, very frightening possibility, that maybe they were all right. Would they keep 14 rejections? An empty bank account, nobody in his corner. Would he walk away? Here's what happened in those 45 minutes. Marcus didn't get a phone call from a mentor. There was no miraculous sign. Nobody came knocking on his car window. He just thought. He thought about the kid he used to be, sitting at a desk in a classroom, understanding absolutely nothing on the board, too embarrassed to ask for help because asking felt like admitting something unforgivable about yourself. He thought about his sisters. He thought about the parents in his neighborhood who worked double shifts and still felt guilty that they couldn't sit down and help their kids with homework. And he thought about something he had read once, a line that had never fully left him. The world doesn't need you to be ready. It needs you to begin. He didn't feel a wave of confidence. Let's be honest, this isn't that kind of story. A felt scarred. A felt tired. He felt the weight of every door that had closed on him. But here's what Marcus did. He made a decision. Not a grand announcement. Not a dramatic declaration. Just a quiet, firm, internal decision. He decided that the rejections were data, not verdicts. He decided that the people saying no were telling him something about their vision, not about his future. And he decided to start smaller. Not smaller dreams, smaller steps. If no foundation would fund him, he would start without funding. He would begin in his own living room, with 5 kids from his block, teaching what he knew. No grant, no office, no credential, just a Saturday morning. 5 kids and a kitchen table. The first Saturday, 2 kids showed up, not 5. 2, and one of them spent most of the hour trying to hide the fact that he was texting under the table. Marcus taught anyway. The second Saturday, 4 kids came. By the 4th, there were 9. A few parents started showing up to not to participate. Who's to watch? To see what this young man was doing in his living room on a weekend morning. He was making progress. Just not the kind anyone outside that apartment could see yet. And this is exactly why stories like these are shared here on Unstoppable Stories. Because the real turning points in a person's life are rarely visible from the outside. They happen in living rooms, in notebooks, in early mornings before the rest of the world is awake. Marcus kept his night job stacking shelves. He kept delivering packages. He taught on Saturdays. He studied every evening, not for a degree, but to become better at teaching, better at communicating, better at reaching kids who had learned to believe they were slow when really they were just unseen. 6 months in, one of the parents, a woman named Doris, asked him how much it would cost to hire him full-time for her son. "I don't do this professionally," Marcus said. Doris looked at him like he'd said something ridiculous. "You do it better than anyone professional I've tried," she said. That was the first crack of light. He raised his fees modestly, carefully, and for the first time, his idea began to breathe. But there were hard months. There was a stretch in year 2 when 2 of his kids had to stop coming because their families moved. There was a period when Marcus got sick, badly sick, and had to cancel 3 weeks of sessions, and he watched the small community he'd built start to drift. He had a night, lying in bed with a fever, when he genuinely wondered whether this was the universe's way of telling him something. But he kept going. Not because it was easy, because stopping felt worse. By year 3, something had shifted, not just in his program, but in Marcus himself. The young man who used to rehearse every sentence before speaking to a stranger now stood in front of groups of 30 parents and spoke without notes. Not because he'd memorized his script, but because he knew his subject, not just the tutoring methods, but the story beneath all of it. Why this work? Muttered. Why these kids deserved more than they were given. He had started with no confidence. They had built it not by waiting to feel ready, but by doing the thing while afraid. His program had gone from a kitchen table to a rented community center room, from 2 kids to 63 enrolled students, from $0 to a small but steady operating budget, funded entirely through modest fees and, eventually, a small local church that believed in what he was building. His students were changing too. A boy named Evan, who had been held back twice, who had been told by one teacher that he probably wasn't college material, scored in the top quartile of his state math exam. Marcus didn't take a photo with Devin to post anywhere. He just sat quietly with that piece of news for a little while. It meant something that was beyond words. The woman who had told Marcus in that parking lot that not everyone is meant to lead. She reached out. She'd heard about his program through a mutual contact. "I owe you an apology," she said. Marcus told her, "You were working with the information you had. So was I." That's who he had become. In year, for regional education nonprofit, reached out to Marcus. Not the other way around. They had heard about what he was doing. They wanted to expand his model to 3 additional neighborhoods. They offered funding. Real funding. The kind he had knocked on doors 4 years ago and been turned away from. He sat in a proper conference room this time, not a community center folding chair. and they asked what he needed. He had a plan ready. He'd always had the plan. It just needed the moment. Within 8 months, his program was operating in 4 communities, serving over 200 students. His mother attended the opening of his 4th location. She stood in the back and didn't say much, but when it was over, she took his face in both hands and said, "I always knew. I just didn't know how to tell you that. In the hard years, I understood." He loved her for showing up. That was enough. Critics who had once laughed became quiet. Some of them reached out, genuinely curious. A few even asked to be involved. Marcus didn't hold grudges. He didn't need to. He had something far better than vindication. He had proof. Before we go further, something important needs to be said. Marcus's story is real in the sense that it reflects the journey of countless real people. But it's not a blueprint, because there's no single blueprint. Some people work just as hard as Marcus and face obstacles that take longer to overcome. Some never get the phone call from the nonprofit. Some have to rebuild after a setback. It isn't fair, and life often isn't fair. Success takes time. Results are not guaranteed, and every person's journey looks different from the inside. What Marcus's story offers is not a formula. It's a reminder that the decision to continue, made quietly, in a parking lot or a kitchen or a hospital room, is where the story actually changes. That's the only thing that's true across every story like this one. Here's the secret, the one this entire story has been circling. It isn't talent. Plenty of talented people give up. It isn't intelligence. Brilliant people walk away every day. It isn't even hard work, though hard work matters deeply. The secret behind every successful person is this. They stopped treating rejection as a verdict. They learned, sometimes painfully, sometimes slowly, that a closed door tells you where that door leads. It doesn't tell you anything about who you are or what you're capable of. Marcus's story could have ended in that parking lot, and nobody would have judged him. 14 rejections is not a small thing to carry, but he drove home. And the next morning, he set up a kitchen table. Your breaking point might not look like Marcus's. Maybe it's a relationship, a career, a health diagnosis, a dream you've been holding quietly because the world made you feel you weren't allowed to have it. But here's what I want you to hear. Your current situation is not your final situation. The struggle you're in right now may be the very thing that's shaping you for something you cannot yet imagine. This is Unstoppable Stories. Because every great success story begins at the exact moment when someone decides quietly, without applause, to keep going anyway. Now, I want to hear from you. What part of Marcus's journey stayed with you the most? Was it the decision he made in the parking lot? Was it Devon's test score? Was it the moment his mother took his face in her hands? And have you ever been in a moment like that where you had to decide whether to keep going or walk away? Tell me about it in the comments. Every story matters here. If this journey moved you, subscribe to Unstoppable Stories for more powerful stories of resilience, courage, and the quiet, extraordinary strength of ordinary people who refuse to give up. Because that's who you are, and that's what this channel is for.